Kaylin, you want to go ahead and start us off?
Absolutely. Well, thank everybody for joining today. I see some familiar names in the attendee list and some that aren't. So welcome. My name is Kaylin Cassett. I'm Managing Director of the Cassett Cannabis Group. We're here today with the GreenSpace Pro team and the Sapphire Risk team and security legend Tony Gallo. So, very honored and happy to be here with everyone. So a little background on how this has all kind of come together. We had been talking with the GreenSpace team about a year ago, and before we saw regulations roll out, and what applications are going to look like, and really what regulatory compliance was going to look like here in New York. We could see what was going on in other states, and we had a call with their team, and the first thing I thought after the call was, wow, these guys are going to put us out of business. And then I thought that might actually be a great thing because I hate doing compliance, and our clients would be a lot better off if they didn't need to hire outside consultants to constantly walk them through compliance and spend a ton of money on lawyers and hire in-house compliance experts. And so we've worked with the GreenSpace team for the past 8 months or more at this point, understanding what the intricacies of the New York regulations, some of the unique qualities of New York as compared to some other markets that they've been experienced in. And we've built out a really excellent platform that makes it so that a general manager type of position can manage a lot of the day-to-day compliance. And that's going to be really important for your margins as a business, and your ability to keep records so that you can, if you have a conditional license, so that you can convert that over into a full license when the time comes. And it makes cannabis a little more accessible to your average entrepreneur and small business. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done and the GreenSpace Pro team has done. And the other part of that too around compliance is making sure that your product is secure. And that's both a regulatory requirement, but also should be a business requirement too. Insurance is certainly tough to get, and if you do have it, I'm sure insurance companies are going to want to see certain levels of security. So it's great that we have Tony here to kind of talk about what goes into securing high value product and keeping your employees safe too. It's a cash business. We see the stories all the time around people coming in and violence occurring inside cannabis and that inside cannabis retail stores, and we really want to be able to avoid that. So kick off today's webinar. Ask a lot of questions. We have a Q&A at the end, and you can reach out to anyone on this webinar afterwards, and ask us about the product, about compliance in general, and just know as if you have GreenSpace Pro, in a sense you have access to the regulatory knowledge that our team here at Cassett Cannabis Group has given to the GreenSpace team, and they're very talented team of compliance experts from other states. So welcome to the webinar, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. So my name is Tony Gallo. I'm the managing partner for Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. We are the oldest national security consulting company in the United States. The oldest. We started in 2013. So in cannabis life, that makes us 9 years is the oldest security firm. And in that time, we've worked with about 600 applicants in the cannabis industry in about 35 states, including New York and New Jersey. Currently in New York, we have 20 clients, and in New Jersey, we have over 125 for this round. And the reason that I want to talk to you a little bit about security today is because A, not only is it important to run your day-to-day business and to be profitable and have a good security plan, but B, it's really going to help you in getting your license. And that's the key. Think about it this way. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is what your town is going to be looking for, or the state of New York is going to be looking for when you apply for a license. And let's talk a little bit about the town briefly. if you're applying in a town, one of the things the town is going to want to understand, first of all, most of the New York market doesn't have cannabis. It's a very small market over the last few years. They're going to want to understand, how do you protect that product, the cannabis and the cash, from coming out? A lot of the towns are under a misconception that what you're selling is like nuclear waste or something of that nature, that, you know, that there are going to be gangs attacking the location, and, you know, we don't want you in our town, or we don't feel comfortable about that. So one of the things I want to talk about today is actually designing the physical security, which is something you're going to have to present, and how that plays into the compliance and the regulatory. We'll look at 2 floor plans. One will be a retail adult use dispensary, and then one will be a cultivation facility. And want to talk about the security systems, video alarms, the access control, and then some of the other things that come into play, the ID checks. New Jersey's a little bit ahead of New York right now in this round of the application, but I feel very comfortable. I'm a Brooklyn boy, so I feel very comfortable that New York is going to come up there quickly and surpass that when it comes to that. But if you can learn anything from any state, I would look at Massachusetts and I would look at New Jersey and their model and see how that fits into the New York model. So let's get into a little bit of the floor plan. Next slide, please. So this is a typical dispensary adult use floor plan design that you would see throughout the United States. The average dispensary is about 3,000 square feet. We've built out the security for about 72 of these locations nationwide. You can probably have a pretty decent dispensary, especially if you're in a city somewhere in that 1,000 square feet. Below that, then you have to get a little more creative. I've seen 800, and then anything really north of 5,000 square feet is one of those mega locations that you would see, say, in an MSO, a Cookies, a GTI, or something like that. The key about this floor plan, and something that you could bring back to your architect, is that almost every single adult use or dispensary in the United States has the same flow to it. So we're going to start in the bottom right. The bottom right is where you see the word vestibule, and it's in green. Basically, that's how a customer is going to enter. It really doesn't make any difference whether they're a medical use customer, say in Illinois, or they're a adult use in New York or New Jersey or something of that nature. The customer is going to enter in through that entrance from the outside. It could be in a city street, it could be a parking lot, or whatever. Once they enter that vestibule, they're going to go and you're going to check their ID. Like I said, medical, you would check their medical ID. Adult use, you would make sure that they're over 21. That's the kind of the first step. A lot of times you'll have a lot of the cities who will question you and say, okay, let me understand, will there be a line outside? We don't want any lines outside your building stretching around the block. We don't want cars blocking the front of it. So how are you going to handle the checking of the ID into the vestibule and then allowing that person into your dispensary? So that is one of the things when you're working with your architect, you might want to speak to them. So as you can see, we walk into the vestibule, we go to a window, we check that ID. There'll be someone there. They'll have a video monitor that can see all of the cameras. When we walked in, we would have a camera at the front that identifies anyone walking in. You may have license plate vision where you can see the license plate number that you might offer. You wouldn't want good lighting there at that point. The individual, once they enter, they should really not be able to see cannabis or cannabis products. So that's where we have that access control at the top of the door that designs that. And like I said, most locations then would, once you check your ID and get approved, you walk into that waiting area. Now, some locations you would walk straight into the dispensary. That's a decision that you and your architect and your building can support. Now, the advantage of a waiting room, obviously, is to answer that city's question or that state question, you won't have many people waiting in line. If you come into the vestibule and go right into the dispensary, there may be some people that are going to either have to wait in the vestibule, and if that's small, they'll have to wait outside, and that could be an issue. So we enter into the waiting room area where we would wait for someone to come and service us, and that's where you would enter into the dispensary entrance. Obviously, from there, that's where you would see the product. You've already been pre-approved. Your ID has been checked, and you would be serviced by a bud tender or someone when it comes to the product. And there you would have cameras. We highly recommend that you would have cameras over the registers. Also view of any areas that an individual might be in there. If there's an ATM, you would want a camera watching the ATM. But that individual then would be serviced, looked at the product. They may actually have to come up to the counter to purchase the product. And so that's the yellow area that we're talking about. And then we're going to go back to the red area. So the red area is the behind the scenes. Like I said, almost every dispensary is built this way. And behind the scenes, you would have where the product is stored. You see that vault area right there. Key to the vault area is that that wall will be fortified. It could be vault panels like you see in a bank. It could be concrete mortar, the cinder block that you see. It could be wire meshing, which is also approved by the state, and that really comes down to the preference of you, your GC, and the amount of cost. Each one obviously has cost to that. All of your product at the end of the night will be stored in that vault environment. So if someone did break into your location, much like a jewelry store, they wouldn't have access to anything in there other than non-cannabis products. All the cash and all the product would be stored in the vault. That's where product could be passed through to the sales floor when someone makes that purchase. And obviously you see the break room, the restroom, the receiving area where products would come in. All of these have camera coverage. One of the keys in New York is to make sure you have adequate camera coverage. This is a freestanding building, so you see that we have cameras outside that cover all angles of anyone walking in. We also have cameras inside that view any activity. So you need to have camera views of any time cannabis products are going to be stored or moved. So obviously anything from the vault to the dispensary will require a camera. If product is not being put into a room such as the restroom or the meeting room, then there's a different expectation by the state of New York. So when you look at a dispensary like this, like I said, quite, sum it up, you're looking in, you're coming into the vestibule area or a waiting room area, you're checking the ID, you're verifying that that person is authorized to come in to buy the product. Individual comes in. I personally like, from a security point of view and from an operational point of view, that there's an entrance in. You see where it says dispensary entry between the dispensary and the waiting area. And then there's an exit out. You see at the bottom part, there's an exit out. What that does from a robbery point of view and from a theft point of view, it prevents somebody or reduces the amount of somebody trying to do something bad, because you really cannot enter this facility unless you actually show your ID, get past the access control points. If I'm entering in and I want to do something bad, I'm not getting into that location unless I show my ID. I can't get through the vestibule. And if I'm leaving and I want to come in through the exit door, I'm going to still be stuck in what we call a man trap, because I can't get through that second door to get into the dispensary. So if you have that ability, if you can work with your architect on that, that would be a great design for that. And obviously, we've just finished building our 72nd location in Wareham, Mass, for a location called Trade Routes, which was a beautiful setup, a vertical, and we are working on several right now in New York with a couple of the hemp to cannabis growers. So let's talk a little bit about cultivation. Let's go to the next slide. So as you can see, this is a smaller cultivation facility. It has 4 flower rooms, but really, you know, our largest facility we ever built was in Nevada, was 450,000 square foot facility. And the smallest we've ever built was a under 10,000 grow facility. But in all, you know, when you look at this design, a lot of the design pretty much stays the same. We just add more flower rooms. So this is a typical grow facility, cultivation facility that you would see in the United States. This one has a delivery component, as you can see from the shipping. And it's the same kind of concept of design, like we said, except the public doesn't have access to that. So let's start with that. You walk in from the entry, which is the bottom part of it. Somewhere in there, you are verified that you can enter. Your ID is checked by the security, or someone there verifies that you're allowed to enter. As you can see, there are cameras that watch all the external part of it. You enter in. To the right. The process would be obviously that we're going from the cloning room on top right over to the vegetation room to the flower room. And you want to flow. Coming out of the flower room, we're going to go into the trim room, which is your biggest security concern. And we're going to then go into our dry or cure room, and then into our vault where the finished product is going to be secured. A lot of people are in the sun under a misconception that I have to protect my flowers, I have to protect my plants. In all honesty, your biggest exposure would be that vault. The bags of product that's been cured and dried and trimmed would amount to, you know, a good amount of that flower room. And if someone did break into that flower room and pulled out 10 plants, you're in much better shape than if they went into the vault. And that's why we have the vault in the middle of the building. We try and do that for both dispensaries and grows, because that is your key point that you want to protect. As you can see, we have access control devices on pretty much all of the doors to identify anyone exiting or entering. We have a one entrance in, emergency exit out. A shipping location, the truck would come into the bay, roll downs would come down, product would be put in that vehicle, and then the vehicle would leave after everything has been secured. The key really here, again, is identifying anybody who enters areas that they should or shouldn't be. Some people like access devices on the flower rooms that they can identify who's using a card to enter in. Some people secure the flower room with one device, and then they're allowed in any part of the flower room. Obviously, there'll be cameras that would see what activity they would have. So every security setup, whether it's a adult use dispensary, whether it's a grow, whether it's a delivery, whether it's a lab, has 3 main components. It has a video surveillance system. It has an access control system identifying anyone going in or out. It has an alarm system identifying anyone who attempts to bypass the access control system that's not authorized, or if you had a robbery attempt or an emergency situation where you had to contact somebody about that. Now, these 3 components are key to your application. These 3 components are key to a discussion you have with your city on your project. Obviously, you're going to want to add safes. You're going to have a guard agency. There are other components that we speak about that we would add to this floor plan. Both these floor plans are on our website. Feel free to take them if you wanted to review them. If you have any questions for me, please let me know. And at this point right now, I'm going to turn it over to Kate, and she is going to tell us a little bit more about compliance. Kate?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tony. So I'll get started just kind of bringing it back to kind of New York. So Tony talked about some cultivation security pertaining to some indoor grows, as we just looked at. For conditional licensing in New York, as many of you on this webinar know, cultivators are limited to outdoor and greenhouse grows. And so there are specific security requirements related to that, which we'll talk about in a few to the conditional licenses. Just an overview on that. In New York, a law was passed in February that amended the MRTA and allowed for the development and awardance of 2 licenses, the adult use conditional cultivator and the adult use conditional processor. As of recently, all the cultivation, all the adult use conditional cultivator licenses, we believe have been awarded from those who qualified for their activity and compliance in the Industrial Hemp Research Partnership Program. The adult use processors, the first round of licenses were awarded for those conditional licenses last Monday at the CCB meeting. And we expect several rounds of licenses awarded at CCB meetings in the upcoming weeks and months. The other license that we'll talk about briefly, which was developed via the conditional adult use retail dispensary license, i.e. card. The applications for that license open later this week. Perfect. Okay, so as far as security goes for adult use conditional cultivators, the security requirements are a little bit more lax than we perhaps expect to see in the annual for annual licensees. However, there is a requirement, of course, that licensees submit a security and staffing plan to the state within 30 days and then implement that plan as part of an ongoing condition of compliance. In terms of security, being that most licensees are growing, conditional licensees are growing outdoors, or in a greenhouse setting with limited lighting, the main requirement is that licensees implement a security plan with sufficient security measures to deter diversion, theft, or loss of cannabis and cannabis products or cash, as well as preventing unauthorized access into areas that contain those products. But to get back to Tony's point, it's not just necessarily about your compliance requirements in terms of security, what your state mandated requirements are. You also do want to implement security measures just so that you prevent losses to your business that are significant, especially when we're talking about dried and cured cannabis and related products. So the security requirements, again, for adult use conditional cultivators are, in terms of actual compliance, are the submission of a security plan. The OCM has issued a risk assessment form that makes it a bit easier for conditional cultivators to submit that plan within the 30-day deadline. However, implementing that plan will be a requirement. In the case of an inspection, you would not want to have that of an OCM inspection, you would not want to have failed to implement that plan, as that could result in some punitive actions that we will talk about later. Another compliance requirement specific to adult use conditional cultivators is traceability. Now, the state has yet to officially name the track and trace program, the track and trace software that cultivators will be required to use. But in the meantime, cultivators are still obligated to track and trace both finished goods as well as inputs. So, seeds, clones, you need to trace everything from the moment that it's obtained and its flow through the supply chain. And so what GreenSpace does is as Ed will talk about later, GreenSpace has some options for helping cultivators trace the required items in lieu of track and trace, in lieu of a track and trace software issued by the state. And so this is something that, again, is not, the state has not formally named it, but cultivators are still expected to comply, and you're expected to track and trace. As far as major deadline goes, we talked about the security and staffing plan. Let's talk about the site plan for a minute, as that is also connected to security. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is an example of a property diagram, which is one of two required elements of the site plan. So the property diagram will show means of ingress and entrance and exits to the property. And there's an important point: the property and the licensed premises are not always exactly the same thing. So a licensed premises could exist within a larger property and not consume the entire parcel. However, the state needs to know the means of public access to that property, so that when they come and inspect your premises, they can see that security measures have been taken to deter or prevent unauthorized access to that property as a whole, and thus the licensed premises. But this property diagram, essentially what it needs to show, again, are means of entrances and exits, as well as other features that property related to that property, such as water crossings and other activities that might be occurring on the property that are not related to the cannabis operation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the premises diagram. Again, this is, this will provide the state with information on the licensed premises within the larger property. So the premises diagram needs to show means of ingress and egress to the licensed premises. It needs to delineate the exact perimeter of that licensed premises, as well as provide the necessary metrics regarding, the distance, the square footage of that, not necessarily square footage, but just essentially it needs to delineate the perimeter in terms of feet and distance. It also needs to excuse me, to show the different areas, what different areas within the licensed premises are used for. So for instance, this diagram shows us the storage area. It also shows us flowering canopy, i.e. the small mixed light tier 1 canopy, and then medium mixed light tier 1 canopy. You would also need to point out areas that are used for minimal processing in the case of conditionally licensed cultivators, as well as drying areas, drying and curing areas. As this premises diagram notes, there's obviously an additional site here that on this license that conducts those activities, such as packaging, processing, and the propagation of veg or immature plants. So we can go back to the previous slide, please. The prior one. Thank you, Sarah. So why is this important when it comes to security? Well, the site plan will be used as a basis for inspection. So if you complete the site plan and the security plan within 30 days, and you say this area is used for this is the point of access to the property, this is the point of entrance or exit to the licensed premises, well, and your security plan, you have attested to certain security measures in your risk assessment document, you need to be able to prove that you've implemented it in relation to the site plan, and prove that that is accurate upon inspection by an OCM inspector. You need to be able to demonstrate that those documents are accurate, and that you have, for instance, implemented the necessary security at the means of entrances and exits to both the property and the premises. Other major deadlines for cultivators are the operating plan due within 6 months of licensure and the annual cultivation report. The operating plan requires that numerous plans, including sustainability planning, as well as pest management planning, among others, are submitted to the state. The annual cultivation report is more of a it more relates to record keeping. So the importance of maintaining records from day one of licensure cannot be overstated. To attempt to put together the 29 pieces of the 29 required elements of the annual cultivation report a week before it's due is, quite frankly, most likely impossible. And so you want to be keeping records all throughout your licensure on various things, including sanitation records, including records of a facility energy audit, including records of submission of cannabis and cannabis products for testing at an accredited lab. Records, similar records but different, and a separate requirement are maintaining records of submission of lab results from New York State accredited labs, records related to plant removal and destruction, records related to all agricultural inputs. These are things that you might be doing on a daily basis, activities that you might be conducting on a daily basis that need to be recorded. And obviously the maintaining of records is both costly in terms of, having someone on staff do that, and also in terms of consuming some of your time. Let's go to the processor slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so the security requirements for processors are a little bit steeper. Of course, these facilities are all indoor, and the security requirements for processors are such that they require that licensees implement and submit a security plan to the state within 30 days of licensure, and then also implement that plan prior to the OCM facility inspection, which must occur within 6 months of licensure. So the security for processors, of course, you have to again submit the plan first. But what that plan needs to do is it needs to show that and essentially be implemented in such a way that cannabis and cannabis products are stored in a secure, lock safe, or vault. Now, I believe on one of the diagrams Tony showed there were vaults included. Now that is obviously potentially an added cost, but it is likely necessary to ensure that your valuable products are not subject to theft or loss. Additionally, the implementation of the plan will have to occur before that facility inspection, because the security requirements are included in the AUCP guidance, and that facility inspection conducted by an OCM inspector will verify a licensee's compliance with both GMP requirements, as well as the guidance, which includes security requirements. Okay, so for traceability, again, AUCP licensees are bound in the same way that cultivators are in terms of tracking and tracing all adult use cannabis through its process throughout the supply chain. So inputs, outputs, even though again the software has not been named, the state still expects you to track that from day one of licensure. With regard to the major deadlines, the OCM facility inspection is required prior to operating, and AUCP licensees are required to begin operations within 6 months of licensure. The other the other main deadline is the annual packaging report, which is due within 1 year of licensure. Again, that goes back to keeping good records, because you will have to supply the state with records of all packaging, the materials related to various batches of products. You need to tell the state essentially the types of packaging material you use by weight, sold and offered for sale and distributed into the state in the prior calendar year. You also need to divide that up by the percentage of all packaging materials sold and the total cost of packaging material. So obviously throughout the year, hopefully you will be selling lots of product and therefore requiring lots of packaging. So these are things that you will need to be keeping records on. Again, from day one of licensure, it will likely be impossible to prepare an accurate report if those records are not maintained accurately. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the path forward. So the consequences of non-compliance, particular to the AUCCs and AUCPs, the first step would likely, depending on the egregiousness of the violation or offense, licensees will likely be given the opportunity to correct those violations via a corrective action plan. If a licensee does not comply with a corrective action plan, which of course a corrective action plan is costly in terms of it being a time suck, because you have to adhere to the terms of the corrective action plan and successfully complete it in order to not receive further punitive actions. So you don't want to get a corrective action plan, because that is obviously something that will detract from your normal business operations. If the corrective action plan, and again, this depends on the opportunity to engage in a corrective action plan, is also contingent on the nature of the offense, and that will likely be up to the discretion of the OCM. However, other types of punitive actions are fines, or ultimately the suspension or the revocation of your license. Additionally, how compliant you are in the conditional period will determine whether or not you are able to successfully transition to a full annual license upon the expiration of the conditional period. So for many of you, that is a huge incentive to remain compliant, I would imagine, as the state will be evaluating your history of violations or lack thereof when it considers whether or not you are a good candidate for an annual license, which will obviously be a competitive process, because you will at that point be compared against applicants that are, applying for the first time as prospective annual licensees. One last piece that I did want to touch on, as Tony was talking about some retail dispensary security planning at the beginning, the card applications, conditional adult use retail dispensary license applications are opening at the end of this week. The applications will run through the end of September, and while the regulations don't necessarily delineate clearly what the security requirements will be, we assume that they will be similar to some other states, and also require things like obviously like cameras and different types of alarm systems and things of that nature. However, we'll have to look to either further regulations or guidance in order to clearly see those. So I will pass it off to Ed to talk about GreenSpace.
Hey folks, thanks Kate. So before we jump into the platform, I kind of want to bring this out to 10,000 foot view in compliance in general, and essentially also bring everything that was discussed together to a central place. So main point is compliance, whether security compliance, inventory compliance, traceability. It shouldn't be something that you're scared of, but it should be something that you respect and understand that certain regulators take it very seriously. Some regulators maybe take it a little less seriously, but at the end of the day, it's something that you have to abide by. And, what we just talked about on the security side and the inspection side, I'll give you a couple of firsthand examples, very important. Some folks may think, well, my security plan is 99% complete. It's, relatively accurate, but, maybe some cameras are out of place and no one's going to harp on that. They'll just give me a pass. Well, I've seen that go the other way quite a number of times. I've been part of several transitions of medical markets to recreational markets in Illinois, for example, in California, but I've also been part of some dispensary openings in New York with the existing medical team that's there right now. And we saw things of out of place cameras or perhaps a sensor that wasn't able to be tested at the time of inspection result in delays of many, many months. So I think it's important for you to be able to know your requirements, know your obligations, and fulfill those obligations and put your best foot forward. Because the way you start your relationship with the regulatory body is kind of how it's going to continue. They're going to know you're a good operator. They're going to know that you mean well and that you're not trying to get one over on them, and they'll be there to help you and work with you. My experience with the former DOH team, which wasn't very heavy-handed at the inspection side of things, and they've rolled over mostly to the OCM. I know they're hiring a little bit too, is they're pretty reasonable and they'll work with you. But at the end of the day, they're accountable to their supervisors. So whenever they come on site, if they see any issues, maybe they could give you a pass on something small, but overall, you still have to meet your obligations, especially when it comes to things like security plan and your baseline requirements for your license. So you have to know what the regulatory obligations are. You have to track them, and you have to figure out a way best to disseminate them to your team so you can figure out what they are on an ongoing basis, because once operational, those regulatory requirements continue with you. And a good example of that, if you just look to your neighbor in New Jersey, or if you are from New Jersey joining us, I'm sure some of the folks have seen this, but within the first month of recreational cannabis, a few of the MSOs who were allowed to sell recreational first were fined a quite large dollar amount because they didn't meet one of the requirements, which is to keep the window that they promised to the state for medical sales only. Now, this is something that an operator can easily track, an operator can easily identify to their employees, to their managers, to their local staff, so they are aware of the requirements. And then you can also confirm that they've met those requirements. And there needs to be a systematic way to go about it as opposed to an after effect. So you have to really plan for these things. And overall, as you go through your process, as you go through opening, or as you continue to operate, as Kate was saying, you have to document. And I put that word in here 3 times intentionally, because if it's not documented, if it's not signed, if you can't prove it, it's the same if it didn't happen. We've been through amongst the team here, I'm sure some of the folks on the line, we've been through numerous audits. And when you're asked for a piece of documentation, even if you can confirm the date and time that it happened, if you don't have a sign-in sheet, if you don't have a record of you cleaning that hallway, or cleaning your utensils, or sanitizing your grow room, it didn't happen. Because again, the inspectors, while they may believe you, they can't take those work papers back to their supervisors and prove that this actually happened. So that will be a matter of corrective action. So what you'll see when we jump into the platform, which is extremely flexible, is it's a perfect place to keep your documentation and to track all of your daily items and your periodic requirements, because those papers get lost. Those papers have coffee stains. Those papers take up a lot of folders. And, we've been to numerous facilities where, you ask a cultivator, you ask any operator, even a retailer, hey, where are all those, COAs, or where are those manifests for the product coming in? Or, hey, for these plants that came in, where's the documentation? And it takes somebody an hour, 2 hours. They say, you know what, I'll get back to you and I'll send it to you later. And that, while sometimes that's okay, it could be problematic, because you could be looking for it for an hour or two and then you never find it. So what you really want to do is you establish a culture of operational consistency and compliance from the beginning. If you teach your people the right way to keep documentation, to understand their regulatory and operational requirements, and they know what you expect of them as an operator, they will maintain that process. And then they will document that process. And then overall, you will become more efficient. You will spend less money. As Kaylin said in the beginning, you'll spend less money on lawyers. You will spend less money on consultants. You will be able to keep more things in-house and streamlined. So that's kind of why you want to figure out the best way to systematize your processes and to really build this into your day-to-day operations, so that it becomes second nature, that you're working in this platform and you know this is where you fulfill a task. This is where you document supervisor review. This is where you signed off on a quality control item. This is where you stored your COA and you know exactly what it is and how it's named, right? And then, another point here is what we're talking about, track and trace. The New York currently has BioTrack, but that's only for medical. Where they're going to go, we don't know. There aren't too many options in the market, obviously, right? There's BioTrack, Metric, kind of MJ Freeway maybe, or maybe those be something completely different that we haven't seen yet. But ultimately, your plants, your harvests, your manufactured products, your retail inventory, those are some of your highest valued items next to your employees and your human capital, right? So you want to protect those, but part of protecting them is to tracking them, because one of the big concerns from the regulator side is that either you are putting product into the illicit market, or you are taking product from the illicit market and you're bringing it into the commercialized cannabis supply chain. We see quite a bit of this in California now. If you guys follow a little bit, there was a whole concept of burner distros where people were using distribution licenses to push product into the illicit market. And eventually the regulators came down on it, and their best point of reference is the traceability of your product. If you can trace product coming in throughout the life cycle and coming out, you're already 95% of the way there, convincing them that you are a good operator and that everything you're doing with the proper intentions of being in the licensed cannabis market. And as Kate was saying, that while there is no process right now through the state, there isn't even too much guidance that basically as part of the annual cultivation report tell you have to do X, Y, and Z. We at GreenSpace, we created a template in an Excel format that you will be able to obtain to utilize in your cultivation process to track your cannabis from the time it comes in to the time it leaves your facility. And the manufacturing side, your batch production records, you can create customized templates. You could do a lot of different things to stay compliant while the state figures out which traceability platform they're going to use and to implement. And then there's even a possibility, and I've seen this happen, where you have a certain period of time to enter your historical data. So imagine if you don't have a proper way to track your plants coming in, your harvest cycles, your waste, your sales, and where they're going to. And then you have to enter all that historical data into this new track and trace system, let's say over the course of 3 to 6 months. How would you even go about that? So just keep that in mind as you see the demonstration of the platform, which Chris is going to jump into right now, in terms of how you want to operate your business and how you're going to stay compliant. Chris, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. You guys see where it says current locations? Hey, Ed, can you guys see my screen okay, buddy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. All right, I'll go ahead and jump into the platform here. I'm just going to be a 20,000 foot view for sake of time. My name is Christopher Lara. I'm the Chief Product Officer over at GreenSpace. I was with Temecca for a few years. I was a pre-mill builder and design of dozens and dozens of dispensaries all over the entire country. And so if you look at GreenSpace, what GreenSpace is a license and project management tool. It's a SaaS product that goes with you wherever you are, both on your desktop as well as your laptop, your personal device, or on your phone. And it's also incredibly useful for team collaboration. One of our value propositions is that it's built by cannabis people for cannabis people. And one of the things, Ed, who just spoke, I showed him a demo of GreenSpace. I think it was about a year ago, and he was like, man, this is amazing. I just spent 6 months building out all the nuances and tables and restrictions in cannabis all throughout Asana, and you guys already have it here pre-populated. This is amazing. And obviously in a short amount of time, he quickly joined our team. So if you look here under current locations, you have locations here. They happen to be in different cities, usually listed, by which city they're in. Some of them are retail, delivery, cultivation. And you've got basically kind of your Excel or list view. You can select these columns. All these are drop downs that pertain particularly to cannabis and to the categories where you can easily sort through and then, export it out as an Excel to see what you need to see right at your fingertips. If I just go ahead and click on one of these, again, a lot of these pertain to cannabis, your DBA, your brand name, your location name, your company name, your store name, they may all be different, which is very unique to cannabis. And then, a lot of the pertinent information, as well as being able to sync it with Dropbox and Google Docs for all your documentation. Here you can put your state, local licenses, your permits, all those pieces of paper you need to have at your fingertips in order to stay compliant. You can have that with you wherever you go. When we look at the license, again, all of this pertains to cannabis, and you can easily store all your documents and have them with you at all times. As far as the property, the square footage, your real estate docs, your APM, where you are in your property status, your taxes and fee. As you guys know, cannabis is the most taxed industry in the country. We made allocations for that, as well as enabled basically custom fields. That way you can easily populate all this information, and with the click of the button, if you're an MSO or you're a grower and you have multiple locations, easily propagate it through all of your locations. Here you have contacts, a horror story over at Temecca. We were building out, an MSO, and they realized they didn't have their security cameras in the right place. When we asked them, like, hey, who's the landlord? I don't know. Talk to operations, talk to real estate. Took us 3 days to find out who owned the darn building, and by that time, it pushed the entire CUP process back. So again, we're super simple. We're not trying to replace Salesforce or a HubSpot, but really just the pertinent information you need at your fingertips. You can easily add whatever you need here, and again, share it with a specific team, a specific person, a specific location, so you can all collaborate and be on the same page. Not only that, you can also add other fields like security, have your security layout, security plan, and have all that documents. As Ed had said, it's operational consistency. A lot of people, they'll use Excel, they'll use, WhatsApp, they'll use Smart Sheets, they'll use Asana. Here we've tried to create an ecosystem to have all that information wherever you go to be able to share with your team. Here you have link projects. Here's a team. Here's a project that's linked specifically to the location. We allow you to link tasks, projects, files, and locations together, as well as have all the files here at your fingertips. You can easily set teams as well as expiration dates that remind you 90, 60 days, 30 days, or day of. Kind of a horror store in Santa Barbara. We built out a dispensary there. As you know, when you're building it out, you might not have your address. You're obviously not going to have a lot of the team or the documentations. You might be working on your community benefit. Well, they didn't have the building yet, so they had everything going to a PO box. Well, they ended up finding out they didn't check the PO box. They ended up losing their license. And here with these alerts, you can easily stay on top of everything you need to with the click of a button. Again, this is just a quick overview. I'm going to go ahead and jump into projects real quick. So projects, we have both templates and active projects, and all these templates, everything to do with opening your cannabis store, your grow, your facility, your distribution. We have timelines that have been built out, by our partners, as well as, some of the jurisdictions. We actually have information in here from the OCM in New York with your annual cultivation report, recall plan, and site plan that with the help of Castetter Group, we were able to put in there. In your active projects, you can go ahead and easily manage this. Again, just super simple, non-complex to be able to collaborate and work with your team. We have a list view as well as a timeline, kind of a Gantt view, and board files where you can easily move this back and forth and stay on top of all your requirements. As you go, you build out your dispensary or your grow facility. So again, I just wanted to go over this really quickly. There's so much more in depth, and we would love to share that with you or set up a personal appointment to go through and how it can really help your business run more efficiently, as well as make sure that you're staying compliant with a lot of the compliance rules depending upon your jurisdiction. So again, I know we just have a few minutes left. I know we have a couple questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Sarah, to open up for questions and answers.
Great, thank you very much. So if you have any questions, please drop it into the Q&A and we will get those answered for you. The first one that we have is for Tony. Let's see here. Will the state be doing a site inspection once a business is ready to open?
Yeah, what we've seen in almost every state is that there's an inspector that'll get assigned to your project. And then they'll come at the time that you're ready for your license and do a inspection of the facility. And if there's any deficiencies at that point, then you would have a period of time to correct them. So I would plan, if I was you, that you will have a site inspection.
We do have another question. What are the compliance regulations around data retention? Is there a minimum video storage retention policy for the state of New York?
Kate, do you know that offhand?
So there's not, for the retail, they haven't necessarily, for the card in particular, they haven't come out with that. For processors, you do need to be able to, it doesn't explicitly state, you know, a minimum in the guidance. But I do believe per the MRTA that you need to maintain video surveillance records.
Yeah, I would say
Under the medical program, it's 90 days.
90 days.
So under the medical program right now. So, I mean, I know you guys have seen the same, and you, Tony, in your security plans, you know, it ranges state to state. Anywhere between 30 to 90 days is pretty standard. I mean, there is some egregious cities, but at a state level, 30 to 90 days, and that's probably what we should expect.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I've never seen really, I mean, 30 to 90 should be what you're planning on.
And I'll add to that, when you're planning your retention space and your DVR or cloud storage, you know, take into consideration your frames per second, your resolution, and how many cameras you have, because I actually just ran into this not that long ago, where after about 6 months, while we thought that X amount of space was going to be enough, all of a sudden the facility was only able to record, you know, I think about 65 days, and it's supposed to require 90 days. And during the inspection that was identified. So not only do the plans properly with folks like Tony who help you guys out with this, but also keep checking your retention on a regular basis, because ultimately the requirement is yours to ensure that you retain the right amount of video surveillance data.
Great. So that looks like that is all of our questions as of now. If anyone has any more questions that they think of later, everyone's contact information, it should be on the screen. Can someone just confirm you can see that?
Yes.
Great. Otherwise, that is the end of our webinar. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.